Bitcoin falling today if concern about inflation is rising? Is it not the hedge against inflation that some had hoped it would be?
Well, let's put things in perspective, right? Bitcoin is up almost 60% on the year with the S&P flat. There's some correlation to asset prices, right? Chairman Powell is easy with money and asset prices go up. If Chairman Powell flinches and people start saying maybe he won't be as easy, that was the body language of his today, right? We're not going to be easier, and that means maybe we take things back earlier. All asset prices are going to go down a little bit. The bigger story, though, the far, far bigger story is that in the last 2 months, Bitcoin and crypto and blockchain have become an institutional asset class. There is no debate anymore. And so from JP Morgan to tell their clients they should put 1% to 2% of their net worth in Bitcoin is a staggering shift. Morgan Stanley getting involved, Goldman Sachs getting involved, all the tech companies getting involved. And I can tell you from what we're seeing, the pipeline is deep. And so we've had this secular shift where all of a sudden, this is a thing now. It's an asset class and everybody is short, right? A few insurance companies have it and most don't. And so every once in a while, you have things called paradigm shifts in markets. We are in the middle of a paradigm shift. And so Bitcoin is wildly outperforming gold, even though they're both hedging the same thing. It's outperforming because we're in this once in a generational adoption of crypto. Banks are frantically trying to figure out how to get into crypto, not just because of Bitcoin, right? The commercial banks, the JP Morgans of the world, make a fortune in cross-border payments, right? JP Morgan made $11 billion last year in cross-border payments, and now they see stable coins coming, and they're like, uh-oh. And so you're going to see a monster investment in this space. We're seeing it in M&A. Lots of the infrastructure companies are being snapped up by tech companies. You're going to see it in M&A. You're going to see it in new participants in Bitcoin funds and in other crypto funds.
So, fine, a lot of investment, but let's talk for a second about near-term catalysts too, because we did hear from Gary Gensler this week. He did cite crypto as a concern. He noted the exchanges in particular, and of course we have a big IPO and Coinbase coming up here. Do you think that any tone around the U.S. government cracking down on crypto could be a catalyst for the stock on the downside?
I think Gary is going to be great for crypto. Gary is smarter than a whip. He understands blockchain and Bitcoin. He taught a course at MIT. I actually was a guest lecturer. And clarity around the rules can only help the space. And so, Jay Powell just didn't want to deal with Bitcoin, period. Didn't want to deal with crypto. And so he just kept punting it. Now we've got an SEC chairman that's going to deal with it head on. Not every project is going to love what he does. But broadly, a clear set of rules is nothing but bullish for the space.
So let's talk about bullish. The CEO of Kraken was on the show yesterday. He said he thinks it's going to get to $1 million within a decade. Do you still think it gets to 100,000 before the end of the year? If so, when? And what do you think about $1 million within 10?
Listen, my brain's this big, not this big. And so I can think in 1 year, 2 year horizons. I think it gets to $100,000 or higher by the end of the year because I see all these new participants coming in. If it doesn't, it'll be there next year. I'm not so concerned. What's interesting to me is the downside has been taken away, right? It used to be people thought, oh, this is tulips. No one thinks that anymore, right? The existential threat of Bitcoin not being real is gone. Every institution in the world is participating. And so it's an asset class and we've repriced it. And so we're heading higher. And so I was talking to a bunch of young kids about this. Because you've been in the space for so long, there's all this anxiety. The anxiety is going to come out of the market as people are starting to build. Yes, I think we're going to go higher. Once you get to 100,000, you're going to say, well, why aren't we at 200,000? And why aren't we at 500,000 is about where gold is. So why shouldn't Bitcoin be as big as gold if it's digital gold?
So right? Some of the best opportunities, Mike, are not even happening in the currency itself, right? You're seeing the firms that are betting on this really rise in private markets. You have a venture investing arm. How are you thinking about where to put your money next when it comes to the venture world in crypto?
Yeah, listen, my favorite business, or I shouldn't say that, I'm gonna get yelled at by my employees. One of my favorite businesses at Galaxy is our venture biz, and we are investing in the interactive gaming space. You see this giant rise in NFTs that's happening. NFTs are basically using the same technology of Bitcoin, right? It's a digital signature you can't counterfeit for art, for IP, for anything creative. And so that's a little bit of a bubble right now, but it's going to be a huge trend. And so we're investing a lot there, and we're investing in DeFi. You know, banks shouldn't be worried about Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin is just another asset. They missed out by trading it and owning it, right? It's an asset like gold. They should be very, very worried about DeFi, right? DeFi are driverless banks, driverless exchanges, driverless insurance companies. It's a bank that's just code. And in the next 2 to 10 years, DeFi is really the threat to banks, threat to the financial institution. And so that's where we're putting our money. We're finding the best teams with the best ideas, and we're funding them early.
I want to talk a little bit about some of the pushback. This from Jeffrey Gunlock on Twitter today. The price of gold is down over 11%, down 11% over the last 12 months. The S&P 500 up 27% over the last 12 months. Bitcoin is up 467% over the last 12 months. Great dispersions often precede great reversions. And then this from Paul Singer last week in a letter to clients: hiding under the bed to avoid people who gloat about being long Bitcoin can get tiring. Deep breathing exercises can work, but only for short periods. We continue to press on for the day when we can say, we told you so. Mike, what's your response to that?
You know, listen, Jeff Gunlock and Paul Singer are awesome investors. They don't get everything right. What they're missing is this secular change, this paradigm shift. They're not seeing what I'm seeing. They're not talking to every big bank in the world who's asking and we're helping on how they get engaged in this system. They're not talking to the mayor of Miami, who is actually setting up so his people can pay taxes in Bitcoin, they can get paid in Bitcoin. This is a movement that doesn't seem like it's going to stop anytime soon. And I think they're missing it. I just think they're missing it, right? Listen, it's harder for old people to get it, right? I bet they didn't meet their wives on the internet. Yet 50% of young people are meeting their spouses on the internet, right, on dating apps. And so sometimes the old people just don't get it.
So speaking of investors, you have Mark Cuban on the other end of the coin, and you've been really quite critical of Dogecoin, and now the Dallas Mavericks are going to be using it as payment. Do you think that's a good idea?
Listen, I don't. I think, you know, Doge was a meme coin. It doesn't really have a purpose. It doesn't mean it won't exist for a while. You know, I've made a lot of money being short Dogecoin, not long Dogecoin. You know, and I don't think it's got a community. What worries me about things like that is Cuban gets in. It's the new investors, the young investors. When I do calls with the hip hop community, they're all talking about Doge. And I'm like, wait a minute, like, let's put people in the safest, best stuff, not, you know, these joke coins. And so I think Mark's making a mistake there. He'd be better off with 15 other different ways to pay for his tickets.
Are there any altcoins, Mike, that you're excited about?
Oh, I love most of the DeFi coins. I love Luna coin. I love Aave, YFI, Compound, this whole suite of products that's going after the banks, Uniswap, Sushi Swap. This is really where the revolution is going to happen, where if you're a bank CEO, you're going to start scratching your head pretty soon and say, what are these things again? And why are they growing so fast? And so, you know, the way I think about it is Bitcoin is a macro asset. It should be looked at with gold and treasuries and crude. And then you have a bunch of protocols, right? Decentralized world compute, Ethereum, Polkadot, bunch of tokens that are going to be part of that platform. And then you have use cases. And it's those use cases, to me, that are the most interesting.
Speaking of use cases, non-fungible tokens. In the near term, how do you see them being used in new ways by new people?
I think every single creative person on the planet is going to study these and try to figure out how their creativity can be preserved, right? Like, so I've talked to 3 young amazing artists. And I said, guys, start learning to create art in the digital form. Great artists never used the digital form because it was too easy to copy. But now that it can live on a blockchain, that it can be authenticated, that it can be unique and scarce, we're going to see great artists migrate. And so right now we're in a bit of a bubble because everything is exciting in that space. But bubbles happen over things that change the way we live. IP, creativity on the blockchain will be part of our lives for the next 150 years. And we're at the very beginning. And so that's why there's so much excitement.
Okay, so if we're going to look that far ahead, we have some folks on Twitter who were very excited about your appearance today. They had some questions for you. Among them, what are your predictions once all the 21 million coins have been issued? What happens when the encryption techniques being utilized are inevitably obsolete?
Listen, 21 million coins is a long way away. I will probably be, sleeping in some nice graveyard at that point. But what happens is the miners get paid in block rewards instead of getting new coins. They'll get fees for authenticating the blockchain. And so that's already figured out. Listen, the encryption, from everything I understand, and I'm not a computer scientist, is almost impossible to break. I'm sure if the science gets to where maybe it is getting possible, the Bitcoin core developers will change it, right? And so it's not like this is only a static thing that can't change. It's the same thing about quantum computing. If you've got quantum, you'll be able to put quantum resistance in. And so and again, I preface this in my computer science, but I've talked to some of the best computer scientists in the world, and that's not the concern here.
So we have one last quick question for you, Mike, and it's a big one. Is there a potential for this to actually exacerbate the wealth gap rather than fix it?
No, listen, I don't think so. I think, first of all, most of the early Bitcoin was bought by millennials and Gen Z and young people. And so you're seeing some generational wealth transfer. Like, think about what's happened over the last few years. The total asset pie in the world has grown. It's grown because we have 4 times as many dollars in circulation today as we did when Satoshi wrote the white paper in 2008 or 2009, right? So we've had an explosion of dollars and other currencies. It's pushed asset prices up. Crypto was a tiny slice of the pie, and it's getting bigger. It's stealing market cap from real estate, from gold, from equities, from fixed income, from all assets. Who's making that market cap? Young entrepreneurs, young investors, some old rich guys like me. But now that's being shifted to institutions as well. Those institutions are managing money for lots of people. And so I think, we're going to have a shift of who's having money. But I think that shift is going to people that didn't have it before. And so I kind of think that's a good thing.
All right.
Crypto itself as well is very egalitarian, right? It goes after, forget Bitcoin. DeFi is going after the banks. The banks are rent takers, right?
Okay.
So it's interesting. The progressives missed this, but crypto is a very progressive movement, not a, it's not the opposite.